Coming up today, nature wants us to be fat. It's quite hard to resist the primal pull of nature, and I will explain why.
Hi, I'm Tony. I'm an author, presenter at Sky Sports, and years ago I went to the jungle and got ill. Very ill. So this is my podcast adventure to find more energy. It's packed with biohacking, science, health tech, supplements, and some of the most well-known experts on the planet.
This is something I spent 4 months of my life doing with electrodes glued to my head so that you can do a lifetime worth of meditation.
Decide what you don't give a fuck about, which is something you don't care about.
Some of it gets quite out there.
I had some stem cells sent up to my house that I had stored, and then I injected myself with mannitol.
And we even hack hangovers.
Alcohol is poisonous. So is water and oxygen in the wrong dosage.
So that's my podcast, Zestology. Live life with energy, vitality, and motivation.
Hello again. Lovely midsummer's day in London, and I'm walking around as usual recording this podcast intro and trying to get as much sunlight into my eyes and into my skin as possible. I've been thinking a lot about circadian rhythms recently because I've been writing a new book and realising that the lure of screens means I want to spend even more time outside, especially at the start of the day, and less time inside looking at a screen. So I think most of us probably feel like that. But it sort of ties into today's theme of nature wants us to be fat, but in a slightly different way, because my nature quite likes it when I'm sitting on my arse doing nothing. And I've also got a very sweet tooth. And today, Dr. Richard Johnson, MD, explains why nature wants us to be fat. And he is a world-renowned expert on obesity and on sugar and fructose and how it impacts the system. And I actually recorded this podcast quite a long time ago with Dr. Richard, and it's sat in my ready to go in tray for the perfect week. And this is it, the perfect week, where I've had a couple of little cheeky summer breaks and probably eaten more sugar than I normally do. And you know, when it's hot outside, it's nice to have an ice cream and all those sort of things. And actually, it's not good for you. And he's pretty hardcore about it. He says, sugar is not a food, it's a poison. So some good food reminders here, or rather non-food reminders. Here is Dr. Richard Johnson on Zestology. Richard, it's lovely to talk to you. Thanks for coming on the show.
It's absolutely a delight to be on your show.
Well, it's a delight to have you. Now, I want to get into your story and your background in a second. But first, why does nature want us to be fat?
Well, so it turns out that there's a lot of mechanisms by which animals will want to actually become fat. There's a lot of a desire for animals to become fat at certain times of the year. Not all animals want to become fat. A lot of animals like to regulate their weight, but there is this big process that animals can engage to become fat. And we kind of studied that. We identified how it happened. And we found out that we have actually activated this very same process that nature uses to try to help animals become fat. And it's for them, it's a survival mechanism. And so it's something that actually our evolution and our biology would like us to engage, because we're always concerned about the possibility that there may not be enough food around. So it's sort of a instinctual process that we've learned how to engage, unfortunately, without our true desire to do so, but with nature's desire that we do so.
Yeah. Well, I want to get into that in more in a second. And perhaps you could explain to people your background and where you come from and your work in. I know I've been sort of checking you out, and you've been up to lots of different things over the years in your career.
Yes. So I'm a physician. I love research, and I've been doing research for over 30 years. I'm highly published. I really am a workaholic, researchaholic. And my interest started off in kidney disease because I'm a kidney specialist, but it kind of migrated with, there's this kind of, researchers, when you kind of discover something, if it really looks interesting, You just follow it. And so I followed my research from basically kidney disease to high blood pressure to metabolic diseases. And in the process, we became very interested in fructose, which is a sugar that's common in fruit and honey, but also is in table sugar and sweeteners like high fructose corn syrup. And we realized that fructose was like central to the development of obesity, and that it wasn't just fructose that we were eating, but fructose that our bodies can make. And in that process, we discovered many, many aspects of what could be driving obesity, and that could explain things like why the low-carb diet works, why paleo diets work, why intermittent fasting works. So we kind of learned how the whole thing works. And in so doing, it gave us also some new insights that people don't know about. And so that's what ended up in my book, Nature Wants Us to Be Fat.
Yeah, and congratulations on that just coming out. I know it's just come out.
Yeah, it just came out February 8th.
It's really nice. I'm a bit of a book cover geek because I run a small publishing company myself, and I really like the cover and the layout. It's very nice. Yeah. And as for the content, I also like that. I really am sort of on board with what you've got to say. And I wonder if we could dig in a little bit more on what you found when you started looking into all this and the role of glucose, understanding sugar in our diet, and what we can do about it.
Yeah. Well, so the very first thing is that when we started in this work, which was in around 2005, when we really started into this work, at that time it was still thought that it was calories that was driving obesity, and that what happens is, you're just eating too much, you're exercising too little, and we can all fix things by just reducing our calorie intake. And one of our very first discoveries was that fructose is actually activates a biologic process that makes you want to eat more. So you do eat more, but it's not because you're just choosing to do so. You're doing it because you are hungry, because fructose causes hunger. So when, normally we don't think of foods as driving hunger. We think of foods as satisfying hunger. But the way fructose works is really a special, unique thing. And what it does is it tends to lower the usable energy in the cell. So energy consists of, the energy we make, which is ATP, which we use to run around and do everything. It's kind of like the usable energy. And then we also have energy that we make that we store. And stored energy is fat primarily. And so when fat is kind of taken out of the equation. So when you have fat, it's not energy that is readily available. You have to break down the fat to make energy. So we live on our ATP. And what fructose does, it's just an amazing thing, is it shifts the food we eat so that instead of making so much ATP, we preferentially store it as fat. So think of it this way. You have these calories coming in, and you shunt some of those calories towards fat, even if you don't need fat, right? Normally you put in, if you would just, if you don't need fat, you would just make ATP, and the ATP would be what you use to run and do all the things you do. Mm-hmm. But when you eat fructose, it actually causes an effect on the energy factories where it suppresses how much ATP is produced, and the result is that the other calories get shunted to fat. And this is sort of interesting because, it turns out that in nature, normally animals regulate their weight beautifully. If they run too much today, they're going to, not run as much tomorrow. If they're going to, if they eat too much today, they're going to cut back and eat less tomorrow, or they'll just burn that energy off. They try to keep within a narrow weight. They always have a little bit of fat storage, but they don't really want to gain a lot of fat. But some animals, they know that they need to gain fat at certain times of the year. For example, if they're going to migrate, long distance migrating bird, it has to, if it's going to fly 10,000 kilometers without stopping, it's going to have some fat to provide it the energy. So it will break down the fat as it's flying. Or like a hibernating bear that won't, that'll quit eating for 6 months. It has to, store fat, because otherwise it's going to run out of its ATP. So there are animals that will actually, they kind of know that they have to store fat, and they will activate this same process, and they'll either do it by eating fructose, or they will probably, what we think is happening is they will also could do it by making fructose. So if they make fructose, so fructose becomes a unique food that's really all about storing fat, whereas glucose, which looks very similar, is really about instant energy. Glucose is really there primarily to provide energy now, and then and fructose is really there to help you store energy. So they have distinct roles. And so, when we kind of discover this, we go, oh my God, the reason people get hungry or that they're getting fat is that they've triggered a switch where they now they're hungry, they can't regulate their weight, they start preferentially storing energy as fat, and they even become insulin resistant. And one of our discoveries was that when fructose causes insulin resistance, it actually is to help the animal by keeping glucose levels high in the blood. And normally the muscle uses a lot of glucose, but when you become insulin resistant, there's less taking up of glucose by the muscle. So that means that there's more of it to go to the brain, because much of the brain doesn't need insulin. And so when the blood glucose goes up with insulin resistance, what it's doing is it's shunting the glucose so that more of it can go to the brain where you need it when there's a food shortage than to the muscle. So even though we would like glucose to go everywhere, if you don't have enough, it's better to, block it from going into the muscle so it can go to the brain where you need it more. So it turns out that this thing is like it's an orchestrated response. So when you eat fructose, you activate this whole orchestrated response. I'm going to get hungry. I'm going to go forage for food. I'm going to go store fat. I'm going to store glycogen, which is another type that's the storage form of carbohydrates. I'm going to become insulin resistant. I'm going to constrict my blood vessels and make my blood pressure go up so that I can, have a good, strong circulation even when there's no food around. And I'm going to do all these things. I'm going to get a little bit of inflammation in my blood so that I can fight off infections. And all these things are like survival things. They were meant to help us. They were meant to help us during a time when there was no food. But if we, you, Tony, and I, if we go out and we eat lots of sugar, and nature is thinking that we're going to use this to store fat for food shortage, but we're not. We don't have a food shortage. And so what happens is now when we're eating this stuff, and, initially it's just, mild insulin resistance, a little bit of fat accumulation, we stay hungry, we eat bigger portions of food, we're not really controlling our weight. But when you do this chronically, the fat gain turns into obesity, the increase in blood pressure turns into hypertension, the insulin resistance turns into diabetes. And all these diseases look like they're totally driven by this pathway. And so I'll stop there and take another question from you.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I'm soaking it all up.
Interrupting this podcast for one moment to tell you about my podcast partner this month, which is the wonderful, the majestic Magnesium Breakthrough. This month focusing on the number one health problem people from all over the world are facing. Do you know what it is? Well, it's actually sleep. Because sleep is like the master hack, it affects everything. And the majority of people are lacking energy throughout the day. And that is often a symptom of a bigger picture, which is not getting enough sleep. Poor sleep can affect your mood, hormones, weight gain, many other factors negatively impacting you. And one of the ways to get over it is by taking Magnesium Breakthrough. The other one is by going to bed earlier and changing your evening routine. The sort of thing that we talk about a lot on Zestology. But Magnesium Breakthrough is something that I take every evening. What I do is about 9 o'clock, I have a little pot around and I get some supplements together. And one of them is, I don't even know how to say it properly, but it's Saccharomyces boulardii. I really like that for my stomach. And the other one is Magnesium Breakthrough that helps me sleep. The other day, I didn't sleep very well. And I woke up in the morning, I loudly complained to my wife that I didn't sleep well. And I came downstairs and the supplements that I put out the night before were still on the kitchen table. So I'd forgotten to take them. And that's probably why I didn't sleep very well. For a limited time, Magnesium Breakthrough have a special offer. They are offering additional bonus gifts for the next 1,000 customers or while supplies last. And so if you order Magnesium Breakthrough by going to magbreakthrough.com/Zestology, you'll get 3 bottles of their full line of digestive health products. So you get quite a lot of free stuff. So this is definitely a deal worth doing. You will get, I'll tell you what we'll get. You'll get Masszymes, their digestive enzymes, another product I love. You'll get a patented probiotic, P3OM, and their HCl product as well to alleviate heartburn and acid reflux. I don't get heartburn, but people who do love that product as well. So go to magbreakthrough.com/Zestology and get a load of free stuff as well. I know they're quite excited about this offer. The people at Bioptimizers and Magnesium Breakthrough have been messaging me this month saying we're very excited about this. So make sure you get it before you're too late. Excellent deal. And I will speak to you more about this at the end of the podcast. But now, back to the show. This is brilliant. It's I'm interested in sort of people listening thinking, right, well, what does that mean? Firstly, you talked about the difference between glucose and fructose.
Yeah.
So in the diet, how does that look?
Yeah. So it turns out that, so when we found that there was this switch, and some people, it sort of looks like what we call the metabolic syndrome. I'm just gonna extend that a little bit further because as we studied it more, we go, oh my God, actually it can also drive things like cancer. And here's a really interesting, we've had a whole series of papers on this, and others have too, but what it turns out is that when you suppress the production of ATP, the ATP is coming from the mitochondria. These are the energy factories. Well, they use oxygen to make ATP, and a lot of the oxygen we breathe is used to make this energy. This is where it's being used. So if we suppress the production of ATP, not only are we lowering our energy so that we're going to become more tired and fatigued and things like that, but we're also reducing our oxygen needs. So it's actually supposed to be a survival mechanism. So for example, there's a naked mole rat, which is this ugly little thing that lives in Africa. And it burrows it lives in these burrows where there's like very little oxygen. I mean, you put a rat in there or another animal, they will die very quickly because it's like no oxygen. But they can live there, and they do it because they make fructose. Their body starts making fructose, and then that reduces their oxygen needs because they're producing less ATP. Mm. So it was meant to be a survival mechanism. But guess what? Guess what cancers do? Back in the 1930s, there was a guy named Warburg who figured out that cancer cells, they like to live off a thing called glycolysis, which is where you make the ATP another way than the mitochondria. So the energy factories are your major way to make ATP, but there's a primitive system called glycolysis. And that system doesn't need oxygen. And guess what fructose does? It shifts down the oxygen needs and increases the glycolysis, this old primitive system. So it turns out that cancer cells, they don't live in a good environment with a lot of oxygen, because they have to metastasize. They spread into tissues, and they don't normally have a blood supply initially. So they have to live in a low oxygen state. So guess what their favorite fuel is? Fructose. So all these incredible studies in nature and so forth show that high fructose corn syrup and table sugar that are rich in fructose are beautiful fuels for cancer cells, breast cancer, pancreatic cancer, liver cancer, colon cancer. A lot of cancer cells love fructose. And so there's even some thought that maybe low fructose diets might be a nice approach towards reducing cancer growth based on these studies in Nature. These are papers published in top journals, okay?
Yeah.
So you can see how this fructose, this survival pathway, can actually be associated with bad things. So your big question you asked me is, so how does this relate to our diet? Well, so in nature, the way many animals do this is they eat fructose. And in nature, fructose is in honey and fruit, which you and I know, hey, that's supposed to be healthy. How can they get fat on that, right? Well, it turns out that they eat a ton of fruit. They're not eating, I'm going to have an apple with breakfast. They're going into trees and they're eating as many fruits as they can. We call it gorging. They gorge on fruit. And so like a orangutan, when it wants to get fat, it will eat 100 fruit in a 2-hour period. A bear will eat 10,000 berries in a day. So they're getting a load of fructose. And so the amount they're eating is huge, and they're gorging, so they're trying to eat it as fast as they can. And the way fructose works is it causes this fall in energy, right? And it does that based upon the concentration you get. So if you drink a soft drink, you're getting a lot of fructose very quickly. The concentration's high. It hits the liver and causes the switch to occur. But if you eat a natural fruit, it turns out like the first 3 or 4 grams of fructose are kind of inactivated by the gut. So you don't get a lot of fructose to the liver, like only 1 or 2 grams versus like 30 grams. So when you eat a natural fruit, you're really not getting a lot of fructose, because at least the first 4 or 5 grams is blocked. And so most fruits have like 5 or 6 grams. So, maybe some have 8 grams. There's some fruits that are bad, like figs, which have like 20 grams. So you have to be careful. But figs are like the sugariest.
Are they?
They really are. That's a concentrated soft drink in a little thing called wheat.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah, okay. So, I know you've written a bit in the book about the low carb or the keto diet preferred, especially for the first month or so.
If you want to lose weight, intermittent fasting or low carb diets is a great way to go to lose weight. And I think if you are at your weight, kind of the diet that I propose is maybe a little bit more balanced, But they are all. One of the great things about our book is it kind of shows how all these different diets work. So, one thing I should mention to you is that we found that that the body can make fructose. So we should just talk about the foods that do that, because so you don't want to drink sugar, right? Because that's got fructose, or eat sugar. You don't want soft drinks like high concentrations of sugar. Fruit juice is bad because it's got fructose, a lot of fructose in it. So, but everyone kind of knows that sugar and sweets and high fructose corn syrup are bad. Well, what we found that was kind of a surprise, we found several surprises, but the first one wasn't a big surprise, but things like, potatoes, rice, chips, what we call high glycemic carbs. These are things like bread, I love bread.
Oh,
Should
yeah.
I should
I like
bread.
rice. Just love rice.
Oh yeah, man. I don't really like rice, but got a hot toast. I like it. And I mean, what can I say? So, but it's bad for you because what it does is when you eat things like that, the glucose in your blood goes up.
Yeah.
It turns out that it's not really the glucose that's the problem, but when the glucose goes up in the blood, it triggers the production of fructose. So when you eat high glycemic carbs and your glucose goes up, that triggers the production of fructose. Now, there are all these tricks that people have. Like if you put things like avocado on toast or something, you can block the avocado, kind of slows the absorption.
Oh, really? Or cooling the rice, is that a good one?
Yeah, cooling. There are all these tricks, right?
Yeah.
And people get things like continuous glucose monitors.
Yeah, I've tried one of those. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, the great thing about that is you can kind of figure out your body and how it reacts. And when you eat a banana, does your glucose go up or not? When you eat a piece of bread, you get a spike or not? And can you block it by putting avocado on it or this or that or whatever you do, cooling the rice or whatever. So if you do these kind of measures, you can try to keep the glucose from going up too high, and then you can get away with like eating these foods. But at any rate, when the glucose goes up, it triggers this production of fructose.
Yeah,
So
wow.
that's bad. But most people know that bread and rice and potatoes are not so great. So I'll tell you a surprise. So this is one that's not known. And it turns out to be super important. And here's the story. When we were studying how this survival pathway works, so this is how you can discover new things. So we realized that that fat is not just used as an energy source, but it's also used to make water. When you burn fat, you produce water. It turns out that a lot of animals, they're burning fat not just for the calories, but for the water. And when the bear is hibernating, it's actually using the water it makes from the fat just as much as it's using the energy. And like there's this lemur, there's a fat-tailed dwarf lemur that lives in Madagascar that actually hibernates in the summer. We call it estivation, but it's hibernation. And then what they're doing is they're living off the fat in the tail to provide the water during the dry season. And It turns out whales, they don't drink. You think they drink seawater? They get their fresh water from their food and also from the fat they burn. And so it turns out that fat is a source of water. So if you're dehydrated and you want to try to hold on to water, if you're worried you're going to be dehydrated, you would like to make fat as a backup. In case if you're a camel, you'd like to have a nice hump of fat when you go out there. So it turns out that mild dehydration, not serious dehydration, but mild dehydration stimulates fat production. And it turns out that the way people, if you want to build up fat, you can eat salt because salt creates mild dehydration. That's why you get thirsty. When you eat salt, you get thirsty because you're creating a dehydrated state. And it's a really cool way because you didn't lose water, you gain salt. So what happens is it makes you thirsty to drink more water, but that saltiness also stimulates the production of fructose. So now you're making fructose to help store fat in response to salt. And it turns out that people who are overweight are eating a lot more salt than normal, than lean people. They're a lot more dehydrated. One study showed that they're 12 times more likely to be dehydrated. And you and I both know what we can do if you're dehydrated. You drink water. Don't drink soft drinks. Soft drinks are dehydrating, and they got the sugar. But if you drink water, you can block the dehydration. It will turn off the production of fructose. And in animal models, when we hydrate them, we can block obesity from sugar even. You can reduce the effects. They still will gain some weight, but we don't completely stop it. But we can slow it, we can reverse it. And so, a lot of people will, you walk around, you see all these people running around and they got their water bottles and they go, I believe in drinking 8 glasses of water a day. And they look good, and you know why they look good? Because the water works. And, in the literature, there was in the New York Times a few months ago, some kidney specialists actually wrote that, this is a myth. Drinking a lot of water does not help block obesity. But actually, they were saying that the reason it doesn't work is because the kidneys will work for you, and they will you don't need it, is because the kidneys, if you get dehydrated, the kidneys will concentrate the urine. But they're not. That's not correct. Our science, which we published in top journals, JCI, Nature, PNAS, show that hydration is good for people who are obese, and that it does reduces fat in animals that are fat, and that high salt intake can drive obesity.
Wow.
And we even show that in people. So here's what you do. Don't eat a lot of salt. If you're going to eat salt, drink a lot of water with it. We actually did a clinical trial. If you give salt to a person, and we did it by giving it in the soup, the blood pressure goes up, you activate the switch. If you give the salty soup with water, you can block the whole thing. So it's not about the amount of salt. It's about the balance of salt and water, and stay hydrated. Now, if you're a marathon runner, don't be drinking huge amounts of water, because it turns out that when you do super hard exercise, it's very easy to drink too much water and drop yours, and then you can become overhydrated, like water intoxication, and that can cause headaches and seizures. So just because water is good doesn't mean you should drink a huge amount, especially if you're a marathon runner, because it's been really reported with marathon running. It's also been reported to be a problem in people who just have surgery. So if you, especially women, and especially gynecologic surgery. So if you're a woman and you have a hysterectomy, don't drink a lot of water in that first 24 hours. But for us, for the average person, if you're not a marathon runner, you're overweight, drink 8 glasses of water a day or 10 glasses of water a day. And you will have a benefit that is super good and inexpensive.
Yeah, very good. Very good. Well, I want to look at sort of a couple of things that people can take away. Obviously, the book is out now, The Surprising Science Behind Why We Gain Weight and How We Can Prevent and Reverse It. Nature Wants Us to Be Fat. There it is. There it is.
There it is.
What is one book that you would recommend people to read, obviously apart from your own? And what is one tip for living with more energy and vitality? I know people will be taking away the water one, but what else would you say?
Yes. So the book that I recommend is called Drop Acid. It's a book that just came out a week after mine. It's by David Perlmutter.
Yeah, I love him.
It's on uric acid. And it turns out that the way fructose works is by producing uric acid, and uric acid does all kinds of things inside the cell that activates it's the driver that reduces the ATP and activates all this process. So uric acid is really important. David has written a beautiful book on it called Drop Acid.
Okay,
and
great.
And then in terms of another pearl, here's the other pearl. It turns out that, activating this switch is how we become fat. It's really and I think it looks like it's driving all kinds of things, including things like dementia. There's some evidence that that's from activating this fructose production in the brain. So this is my book goes into all of the lots of tricks and how to stop that. But there's another issue, and here's the issue that the big pearl for you. The way this causes obesity is it attacks those energy factories. When you eat fructose, the uric acid stuns the energy factories. And then that reduces the energy, the ATP, and activates this whole process. Initially, when you eat sugar, and so forth. It's a temporary thing. So the energy factories reduce their ATP and then they recover. But when we hit it again and again and again and again over months and years, what happens is that these energy factories get damaged and they become less and less. And so what happens is when you first become overweight, it's very much easier to lose the weight. When you first gain a few extra pounds, it's like nothing to get rid of it. But after 5 or 6 years of being overweight, it starts getting a little harder to lose weight. And when you've been overweight about 20 years, it is really hard to lose weight because your energy factories, it isn't a temporary thing anymore. They're permanently decreased. And so it seems like you're locked in. But here's the good news, Tony. You can rescue your mitochondria. You can bring them back. And when you do, you won't have that problem of, dieting and then having the weight come back up. So the way you have to do that is you have to stimulate those mitochondria to grow back. And there's some little things like, this is where things like green tea and vitamin C and dark chocolate have been shown to have some benefit. But the thing that really makes a difference is exercise. And exercise, it isn't to lose weight. To burn calories. It will burn some calories. You should be exercising to stimulate your mitochondria to come back. And that's what happens when you exercise. But it's only a certain type of exercise. It's an endurance type of exercise. It's like what we call zone 2. So you don't have to work very hard. Zone 2 is where you just bring your heart rate up a little bit, but you have to exercise to the point where it's a little difficult to talk. When you're walking fast and you're having trouble talking, you can talk, but it's a little bit difficult. Or if you're on a stationary bike or a regular bicycle and you can talk, but not easily, you're in zone 2. That's when you're in zone 2. You do that 3 times a week, 40 minutes a time, 30 to 40 minutes. It's a long time. I would recommend 40 minutes, and it will help you. It will give you what you need so that when you stop activating the switch, you can actually get back to your weight and stay there.
Yeah, it's all about zone 2.
Zone 2. It's zone 2. Yeah,
okay.
It's not zone 3 or 4 or 5. It's zone 2.
Fantastic.
You need to. What that does is that's the level that keeps those mitochondria working hard, but without getting that oxidative stress that kills them. And so it's really good, and it helps them recover.
Richard, fantastic. Absolutely brilliant. It's been so good to talk to you. So obviously the book is out now, Nature Wants Us to Be Fat, and we will link to that. And is that where you want people to go and find that on Amazon?
Yeah. So you can find it, it's in all bookstores, Amazon, Barnes and Noble. You're in the UK, so but Amazon would be a good place to find it, but it should be in a lot of different bookstores. I also have a website, drrichardjohnson.com. I'm a researcher, but I'm now trying to become more active in social media, and as well. So I've got an Instagram, Dr. Richard J. Johnson. And,
I had a look at that.
But anyway, the website's pretty good. I have little stories in there and so forth.
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, it's really great to talk to you. Thank you so much. I'm definitely going to have a glass of water now and then get into zone 2 for 40 minutes. And
me too.
Yeah, great.
I'm going to do that today too.
Great. Good. All right. Well, look, great to talk to you. And thanks again for coming on the podcast.
You bet. Thanks a lot, Tony.
That is it for today's Zestology. Thank you to Dr. Richard Johnson, and thank you as always for listening. Thank you also to my podcast partners, Bioptimizers. Today looking at the number one health problem people face from all over the world. It is undoubtedly a lack of good quality sleep, and it affects everything else. Now recently I went to go and stay with a friend of mine who has got all sorts of aches and pains, real achy problems, and he just can't heal. And it's especially bothering, I think, his Achilles and his leg and his knee. I felt really bad for him because he loves exercising and biking and all sorts of things. He's got young kids, and these issues just won't heal. I'm not going to say who the friend is, but I said to him, mate, what time do you go to bed at night? And he said, normally by 1. I was like, 1 in the morning? Right, but you've got 2 kids, so what time do they wake you up in the morning? Normally up about 5:30. Now, how can the body start to heal itself if you're going to bed so late and you're waking up so early? Now, what he needs is, 1, to go to bed about 3 hours earlier. I can't help him with that. And the second thing is probably take a decent supplement that will help him with his sleep. And Magnesium Breakthrough may be the one for him. I did mention it to him, and I mentioned the discount code as well. Sleep can affect your mood, hormones, weight gain, and many other factors. And it really is important to optimize your sleep. Now, obviously you can go to bed earlier, but by taking these 7 essential forms of magnesium included in the full spectrum Magnesium Breakthrough, you can help optimize your sleep. Often when I'm not sleeping so well, it's because I'm sort of a bit jerky. I haven't got the right minerals in my body. I haven't got enough magnesium. And I don't know, a bit jerky is probably not the technical term, but that's what it is. And Magnesium Breakthrough is the one that I take. I've got 3 bottles of it in my house at the moment. For a limited time, Bioptimizers, the makers of Magnesium Breakthrough, are offering additional bonus gifts for the first 1,000 customers to get in touch. So you're going to get free products to try if you go to magbreakthrough.com/Zestology. You will get their digestive product, Masszymes, and that's a patented probiotic, P3OM, and their HCl product as well to help with heartburn and acid reflux as well. So you order the Magnesium Breakthrough, you get the other products for free. If you're going to order it anyway, then you'll get, I think, 3 different bottles to try on top of it, which is nice. So go to magbreakthrough.com/Zestology for free stuff. If you're in the UK, use the code Zestology10. In fact, the code Zestology10 works on all Bioptimizers products all over the world. If you're in the UK, go to bioptimizers.co.uk and use the code Zestology10. And my mate needs to set his alarm a lot earlier. The problem is that he runs a side hustle and he wants to be working in the evening because he's got his day job during the day and he's looking after the kids before bedtime. I mean, I know it's difficult, but honestly, when you don't sleep well, nothing's as good. And you're not showing up with your best self for your kids either. I know with 1 hour's less sleep, I am just not showing up well in a family sense. So I have to go to bed on time. And just probably oversharing here, but my son has decided he really likes sleeping in with mummy and daddy at the moment. So one of us sleeps with him at the moment, and he likes a wriggle in the night. So you have to go to bed early to make sure that you allow enough time for a few little wriggle wake-ups. There you go. Little vignette into our lives. Have a great week anyway, and I'll speak to you next time.